On May the 19th, 2012, Marcos Matsunaga, one of Brazil's wealthiest entrepreneurs, vanished just before a billion-dollar business deal that could have made him the first billionaire in his family. His wife, Alice, reported to the police that her husband did not return home after a late meeting and was not answering his phone. The entire nation of Brazil was shaken, suspecting a kidnapping orchestrated by business rivals. But the truth behind this disappearance was a brutal story of love, betrayal, and a meticulously concealed death, a case that became the subject of countless documentaries and shocked Brazilian society to its core. Marcos Matsunaga was born into a family of generational wealth. He was the grandson of Yoshizo Kitano, a Japanese immigrant who arrived in Brazil with nothing and built the Yoki food empire from a small flour mill in the mid-20th century. Yoshizo's success not only amassed immense wealth, but also laid the foundation for a family legacy that Marcos was destined to carry forward. Inheriting the family business, Marcos proved himself to be a brilliant leader. Under his management, the family's wealth multiplied several times over, bringing him closer to his dream of becoming the first billionaire in his lineage. However, his business success could not compensate for the personal flaws he carried. In terms of personality, Marcos was a man of contradictions. He possessed exceptional business acumen, a visionary outlook, and decisiveness in critical decisions. However, he was also known to be temperamental, arrogant, and prone to controlling everything around him. While these traits may have been advantageous in the business world, they became significant barriers in his personal relationships. Physically, Marcos was not particularly striking. He had been overweight since childhood, was nearsighted and wore thick glasses, and was short and awkward in social interactions. These characteristics created an invisible barrier between him and the world, making it difficult for him to form friendships or connect with women. In Brazilian society, where physical appearance and charisma are highly valued, Marcos often felt alienated and isolated. Marcos' romantic life reflected these struggles. He found it challenging to build lasting relationships. Instead, he frequently turned to escort services to fulfill his emotional and physical needs. This not only highlighted his deep-seated loneliness, but also showed how he used his wealth to compensate for personal shortcomings. Marcos's first marriage was born more out of desperation and family pressure than genuine love, lasting only a few years. It quickly became a source of regret for both parties. His first wife tried to tolerate Marcos's difficult personality, but ultimately could not endure it. What made matters worse was Marcos's blatant infidelity. He made no effort to hide his pursuit of escorts on dedicated websites, which not only hurt his wife, but also demonstrated a fundamental lack of respect and responsibility in the marriage. Divorce became inevitable, leaving Marcos with deep emotional wounds and skepticism about finding true happiness in love. Alice, 6 years younger than Marcos, came from a starkly different background. She grew up in a poverty-stricken area with high crime rates, where hopes for a brighter future were elusive for most children. Alice's family epitomized social dysfunction she never knew her father, and her mother, an alcoholic, was in a relationship with an abusive partner. From a young age, Alice endured violence and abuse. These experiences not only caused deep psychological trauma, but also forged her resilient character and remarkable survival instincts. Alice learned to hide her pain, adapt to harsh circumstances, and, most importantly, sees any opportunity to escape her situation. After graduating high school, Alice found the courage to leave home. She trained as a nurse and worked in a nursing home, displaying compassion and a knack for caregiving. However, the job quickly drained her, as she tended to form deep emotional attachments to her patients. Realizing she needed a more stable career to achieve independence, Alice decided to pursue a law degree. This was an ambitious choice for someone from her background, reflecting her strong will and desire to transform her life. However, a lack of funds for tuition forced Alice to find alternative ways to support herself, leading her to become an escort. This decision was not just about money, but also reflected Alice's pragmatic understanding of the world. She recognized that her appearance and charm could be tools to achieve her ultimate goal of escaping poverty and securing a better life. It was not an easy choice, but for Alice, it was the most realistic path to her dreams. The meeting between Marcos and Alice took place under unique circumstances: an affluent entrepreneur seeking companionship and a young woman needing money to pursue her ambitions. Initially, their relationship was purely transactional, with Marcos becoming a regular client of Alice, known for his generosity with gifts. However, something shifted in their dynamic. For Marcos, Alice was more than just an escort. She was the first woman to truly listen to him without judgment about his appearance or difficult personality. Alice had a unique ability to make Marcos feel desired and valued, something he had never experienced before. For Alice, Marcos represented the life-changing opportunity she had always sought. He was not only wealthy, but also showed genuine care for her. More importantly, Marcos offered Alice the stability and security she had never known. After 6 months, Marcos fell so deeply in love with Alice that he decided to divorce his first wife to marry her. This was a bold move for a typically cautious man like Marcos. To conceal the true nature of their meeting, they fabricated a story about meeting at a coffee shop, a small but significant detail that showed their awareness of the unconventional nature of their relationship. Marcos's family had reservations about Alice's true intentions, with their life experience and understanding of human nature. They sensed something amiss in the relationship. However, they did not strongly oppose it, perhaps because they saw Marcos happier than ever or hoped the marriage would bring him stability. The wedding was a lavish affair in traditional Brazilian style. Alice wore a pristine white gown. The guest list was extensive. The cake was grand, and everything appeared perfect on the surface. For Alice, this may have been the first time she experienced true luxury and respect. For Marcos, it was validation that he had finally found happiness in love. After the marriage, Alice moved into Marcos's luxurious mansion, stepping into a world she had never imagined. The house was not just a residence, but a reflection of its owner's complex personality. Marcos had a habit of collecting various items: fine wines stored in a private cellar, weapons kept in a secret room, antiques, and modern art. These hobbies could be viewed from multiple perspectives. They showcased his wealth and appreciation for art, but might also reflect a need for control and possession. Notably, his collection of weapons hinted at a darker side of Marcos's personality that Alice had yet to discover. The couple's inability to conceive naturally posed a significant challenge to their marriage. They resorted to in vitro fertilization (IVF) after multiple failed attempts. When they finally welcomed a daughter, both showered her with love and care. The child was raised in luxury and traveled the world as she grew. One of the couple's most unusual shared hobbies was big game hunting. Marcos taught Alice how to shoot, skin, and butcher game with knives and axes. These skills would later prove crucial in the case. Alice learned not only how to handle weapons, but also how to process carcasses with professional precision. They also kept venomous snakes in a terrarium, an idea Marcos had that his first wife opposed, but Alice enthusiastically supported. This demonstrated Alice's remarkable ability to adapt to her husband's eccentric tastes, possibly out of genuine love or a desire to maintain the luxurious lifestyle she had gained. In the spring of 2012, Marcos stood on the cusp of the biggest opportunity of his career. He was preparing to sell the family business to invest in a new venture that could make him a billionaire. This was not just a business deal, but the ultimate affirmation of his talent and vision. To facilitate his work, they moved to a high-end apartment near his office. Marcos became extremely busy with meetings and negotiations, often not returning home. He promised Alice that once the deal was finalized, they would transform their lives and spend more time as a family. However, during this period, a significant event unfolded. Marcos began an affair with Natasha Villalima, an escort from the same website where he had met Alice. This was not merely a betrayal, but a deeply humiliating act for Alice. Alice hired a private investigator to look into her husband and obtained undeniable evidence of his infidelity. The photos and videos not only showed Marcos with Natasha, but also revealed the seriousness of their relationship. Marcos had gifted Natasha an expensive car and even paid to have her escort profile removed. Particularly painful was the fact that Marcos took Natasha to places familiar to Alice, displaying complete disregard for his wife. This suggested that the affair was not just about physical desire, but also carried an element of vengeance or deep dissatisfaction with his marriage. When confronted with the evidence, Marcos promised to end the relationship with Natasha. However, he continued to meet her secretly, showing a complete lack of respect for Alice and their marriage. According to Natasha's later testimony, Marcos even expressed intentions to divorce Alice and start a new life. On May 19, 2012, all the accumulated tensions erupted in the upscale apartment. According to Alice's initial statement, she showed Marcos the evidence of his affair, which led to a heated argument. Marcos not only showed no remorse, but also slapped Alice and insulted her past as an escort. A violent confrontation ensued, culminating in a horrific crime. However, the details Alice provided about that night were riddled with inconsistencies. She claimed that in a panic, she grabbed a gun and shot Marcos. But forensic evidence revealed an unusual bullet trajectory, suggesting the victim was sitting or lying down and not in a defensive position, which contradicted Alice's self-defense narrative. The most horrifying aspect was what happened after Marcos was shot. Instead of calling for help or the police, Alice committed an unimaginable act of brutality. She dismembered her husband's body, using the skills Marcos himself had taught her during their hunting trips. Her nursing knowledge gave her an understanding of human anatomy, while her experience processing game allowed her to carry out the task with chilling professionalism. Most shockingly, forensic analysis revealed that Marcos was still alive when he was decapitated, as evidenced by blood in his lungs. This meant Alice deliberately subjected her husband to unimaginable pain in his final moments. Throughout this ordeal, their daughter was asleep in a nearby room, unaware of the tragedy unfolding just meters away after committing the crime. Alice displayed a chilling level of composure in covering her tracks. She packed the body parts into 3 heavy suitcases and dragged them out the next morning. Security cameras in the building captured this. Though no one suspected anything at the time, Alice chose a remote area about 50 kilometers from their home to dispose of the body parts, demonstrating meticulous planning. She wrapped the remains in garbage bags and discarded them, hoping they would never be found. The most intricate part of her cover-up was crafting a believable story about Marcos's disappearance. Alice capitalized on his ongoing billion-dollar deal to create a narrative of kidnapping by business rivals. She also used his affair with Natasha to suggest that Marcos had run off with his mistress. On May the 20th, 2012, Alice reported Marcos missing to the police. She stated that he had gone to a meeting the previous evening and never returned, and his phone was unreachable. Given Marcos's prominence and the impending billion-dollar deal, the police treated the case as a serious potential kidnapping for ransom. The initial investigation focused on the kidnapping theory. The police confirmed that Marcos did not attend the meeting and waited for a ransom demand, which never came. Investigators questioned family members, business partners, and explored whether Marcos had any enemies. However, they found no clear motive, as Marcos was known as a shrewd businessman who sought mutual benefit rather than confrontation to bolster her story. Alice visited Marcos's parents to confide about his infidelity. She detailed discovering his relationship with Natasha Villalima and hiring a detective to gather evidence. Alice described how Marcos gifted Natasha an expensive car and attempted to erase her escort past. Notably, Alice received the photos and videos from the detective on May 20th, a day after Marcos's death. Yet, she used this evidence to tell her in-laws that Marcos had fled with his mistress after his affair was exposed. This story was highly convincing, as it aligned with Marcos's known behavior and character. His family may have suspected he was capable of something reckless when confronted with his infidelity. About a week after Marcos's disappearance, a passerby discovered the garbage bags containing the body parts in a remote area. The gruesome scene shocked even seasoned investigators. The body had been systematically dismembered, suggesting the perpetrator had surgical skills or experience as a butcher. The cause of death was determined to be a gunshot to the head. However, the most chilling detail was the presence of blood in the victim's lungs, proving Marcos was still alive and breathing when decapitated. This elevated the case from a typical murder to one of exceptional cruelty. A breakthrough came from reviewing the building's security footage. Videos showed that on the evening of May 19th, Marcos received a pizza delivery and entered the apartment as usual. He never left afterward. More crucially, the footage revealed Alice dragging 3 heavy suitcases out of the apartment the next morning. Given their weight and the effort required to move them, it was clear they likely contained Marcos's body parts. When confronted with this video evidence, Alice could no longer deny her involvement. She broke down in tears and ultimately confessed to the crime during the trial. Alice attempted to portray herself as a victim of a controlling and abusive marriage. She claimed Marcos constantly belittled her escort past, called her a bad mother, and controlled every aspect of her life. Alice also alleged that Marcos threatened to divorce her, take their daughter, and leave her with nothing. According to Alice's testimony, the fateful night unfolded as follows. She confronted Marcos with evidence of his affair. He became enraged and slapped her, and in a panic, she grabbed a gun and shot him. Alice insisted this was an act of self-defense, not premeditated murder. However, Alice could not adequately explain why she dismembered her husband's body. She only stated that she panicked and didn't know what to do. So she used her nursing knowledge and hunting skills to handle the situation. One of the biggest inconsistencies in Alice's testimony was the timing of when she received the evidence of Marcos's affair. She claimed she used the photos and videos to confront him on the night of May 19th, but records showed she only received them from the detective on May 20th, after Marcos was already dead. This suggested Alice had planned the crime in advance and used the affair as an excuse to justify her actions. She had crafted a detailed story to conceal her true motives. Natasha Villalima provided a starkly different perspective on Marcos and his marriage. According to her, Marcos expressed concerns about Alice's mental instability and his desire to divorce her. He planned to sell the company, move to Florida to start a new business, and had no intention of taking Alice with him. This testimony suggested that Alice may have known about Marcos's plans and felt threatened about her financial and social future. If Marcos divorced her and left, Alice would lose everything, from her luxurious lifestyle to custody of their daughter. Natasha also confirmed that the last time she met Marcos, he complained about family scandals and seemed exhausted with his current situation. This hinted that Marcos genuinely intended to make a fundamental change in his life. Forensic evidence exposed the falsehoods in Alice's account. The bullet's trajectory indicated Marcos was sitting or lying down when shot, inconsistent with the confrontational scenario Alice described. More critically, the presence of blood in his lungs proved he was alive when decapitated, which could not have occurred in a panicked act of self-defense. Witnesses, including Marcos's family and friends, testified that he had never been physically violent. Despite his difficult personality, this significantly undermined Alice's claims of domestic abuse throughout the trial. Alice displayed a disturbing lack of remorse. She focused solely on justifying her actions rather than showing genuine regret for Marcos's death. This demeanor left a negative impression on the jury and the public. Marcos' family, particularly his parents, endured double devastation losing their son and discovering that the woman they treated as a daughter-in-law was his killer. They also fought to gain custody of their granddaughter, fearing the psychological impact of her being raised by a mother capable of such a crime. The Brazilian public followed the trial with intense interest, with many outraged by the brutality of the crime. The idea that a woman could commit such an act against her husband challenged traditional notions of gender and violence. Alice was convicted of premeditated murder with exceptional cruelty and concealing a crime. The 20-year prison sentence she received sparked controversy, with many arguing it was too lenient given the crime's brutality. The court's decision may have been influenced by Alice's gender and the fact that she had a young child. In Brazil's judicial system, these factors are often considered mitigating circumstances. After Alice's conviction, Marcos's parents were granted custody of their granddaughter. This was a rightful decision to protect the child from the psychological impact of living with a mother who killed her father. The Marcos Matsunaga case is not just a story of crime, but a tragedy of love, betrayal, and the consequences of greed. It illustrates how one's background can shape their character and lead them to the darkest choices. Marcos, with all his wealth and success, ultimately became a victim of his own longing for love. He trusted and loved Alice sincerely, never suspecting that the woman he helped lift from poverty would take his life. Alice, who rose from a poor girl to the wife of a wealthy entrepreneur, chose the most brutal path when she feared losing everything. Her actions not only destroyed Marcos's life, but may have left a lasting psychological impact on their daughter. This case will be remembered not only for its brutality, but also for the profound lessons it offers about human nature. How circumstances can turn someone into a monster, and how love can sometimes become a deadly weapon in the hands of those who know how to wield it. In the end, justice was served. But nothing can bring Marcos back or erase the pain of his family. Their young daughter, the most innocent victim in this tragedy, will carry the painful story of her mother killing her father for the rest of her life.